So it walks you through kind of our process with those basic questions in place. So these are resources. So if you want to work on paper, those are options. You can download the client intake checklist, you can complete it, you can download any of these checklists, complete them, and then you can come and complete the whole packet as a whole. Or you can start by just entering the information into the system. The other things that are saved here are the season of sharing guidelines for this year. I'm starting a frequently asked questions document. Right now it's mostly blank, but as people direct questions my way, as things come up, we're just going to start compiling them there. And if we have, a great call where we got a lot of really common questions, what I'll probably do is put an announcement on your home screen that says, hey, we added 10 new questions to the frequently asked questions document. Go ahead, take a look at it in your own time. Here's where it is. And that's a place for us to just kind of keep track of those things as they come up. Because even in just my limited time here, I know that I've seen some of the same questions make the circuit. So it's a great place to have them, save them, and be able to update them as we need to. There's also the most recent W-9 form if you need a copy of it. So this is an area that's really documents. They're meant to be, reference documents for you, things to kind of help make this process easier. And then also a great way for you to check client usage on your own. So let's say we've double checked, we don't see our client in this kind of duplication prevention system. We're ready to enter them into the system, and we're going to do it directly because we aren't doing it on paper today because we are on a virtual meeting. We can come over here and we're going to see if the first thing that we'll want to do is see if our client is already in the system. So we're going to check, we've checked that duplication prevention database. We know whether or not they've accessed funding, but we don't know if they've been input into the new system yet. Essentially, like I said, I can't import everybody's records from the previous year over into this system because everything's on paper and it isn't all digitized. So knowing that we can now do that, you're going to be building out client profiles from the beginning, kind of starting from the ground up and adding them into the system. The first thing that we'll want to do is see if our client is already here. Now, this is a little bit weird, so just bear with me. It does search by text, so you can sort by first name or last name, but probably the thing you want to do is be able to type in your client's name and see if they're here. This is a search option. So I know that this looks funny where it says full name show all. If you click on that show all, a little screen pops up and this is where you can search. So if I wanted to search for, anybody with my last name, which there's a lot of them right now because I tested this a lot on myself, I can type in my last name here and I can see who in the system matches my last name. I can also do that by first name. It's basically, oops, I spelled it wrong. But it's basically just by the text that you're entering into this field. So you could enter first name, you could enter last name, you could enter partial name, and it will search through all of the records to tell you whether or not they are here. The cool thing that you can see here is it tells you my first name, it tells you my last name. If I have a phone number, email, identifying information in there, we can verify that it's me. Obviously, these are all me. In real life, this should not happen. There should not be 4 of the same client in here. This is just me doing a lot of testing. But we can use these things to identify if it's me. We can also see a birth date. And then we can also see which household these clients are a part of. So if my name was Angelica Hull, but my spouse's name was Eric Richards, and he was saved under the Richards household, you would still be able to see that here. Here's an example. You can see my name is Angelica Hull, but in this situation, I'm part of the Russell household. So you're able to double check in a couple of different ways, which is really cool. The other thing that you'll see here is that on these Angelica Hulls, there's obviously a lot of them. There's only one right now that's giving me the option of starting a funding request. The reason for that is that only one of these is currently affiliated with my agency. So right off the bat, this Angelica Hull right here, the one who's part of the Russell household, this is somebody who came into my agency and my agency entered them into the system and they already have an existing relationship with my agency. The cool part is you can also see people who have relationships with other agencies, and you can create those relationships with your agency if you need to. The way that you would do that, so we're going to look at this test household. So let's say we wanted to make Angelica Hull here in this test household one of my clients. Maybe I was a client at the school district and now I am a client with Harvest House, and Harvest House needs to create that relationship. First off, I'm working with our developer to just add a button here that says create a relationship with my agency. That should be on here by the time we go live. If not, we can go over to the households tab. We know that the family that it's a part of here is Test Hull. So we'll go over to households. Same thing, we can click on this show all and it becomes a search bar. If we click here, we know that I wanted to look for test. And here's the household that I'm looking at. If we click view members for that household, it will pull up every person who has been affiliated with that household. And under each person, I have the option to create a relationship with my agency. So let's say, maybe my daughter was the one who got assistance through the school district at some point, and now I'm coming in, I'm a different member of that household, I'm approaching a different agency for assistance. You can create a relationship with your agency. It doesn't take away any of their existing relationships, it just creates one with you, which is pretty cool. So then in the long run, if you look at the relationships in each household, we can see who they've approached and when they've approached them and who might have existing and standing relationships. So you're not taking any records away, you're just adding a new record to these client records. So I can do that. What'll pop up is a kind of question. It's going to say, what's your agency? In my case, Community Foundation. Who's the contact there? It's a little bit confusing because this is all my name, but these will pre-populate based off of the account that you've logged in under. So if you are logged in and you are an employee of the school district, this will say Sarasota County School District or Manatee School District. This will say your name. You shouldn't have to change any of that information because it's affiliated with your login. The only question is, are they receiving case management with my agency? Is this a time where we're just doing a really quick stopgap? They need $200 for their electric bill. That's the only thing we're really serving them with. Great, we'd select no. I think most of the time we're going to select yes. We know that a lot of you on this call are case managers who are working with them in more ways than one. Either option is fine. It's just, we are just curious to see kind of the proportions that come out with a yes versus a no. You select that, you go ahead and submit it, and then a relationship has now popped up with your agency. If you exit out, you can see now test hull, where I didn't have the option to create a funding request or view funding request before, I now have it. So I have documented formally that I am now working with this client. Their information that's already in the system is now visible to me, and I can also apply on behalf of that client. Does that all make sense so far? All right. So the other thing is, let's pretend like we came in here and we didn't see the person that we were serving. So let's say we were searching through here, their name isn't here, we looked under their client name, we searched that way, we looked under the household names, we didn't see them here either. Same thing, you can search the same way, click that show all, and you can see you can search by last name or anybody else in the household. If we want to create a new household, so that the person we are serving isn't here, we don't see a household they've been affiliated with, we can create one in this window. You can create a client or a household from either tab. So these tabs are both really different ways of viewing the same information. So client tab is breaking it out by specific clients. Household tab is then grouping those clients into households and giving them a household name. When you're creating a new household, I think it's easiest to start at the household tab just because that will complete the household information as well as the client information. If you start with just the client information, it's going to ask you to then build a household that client can belong to. And once again, the reason for that is trying to track that spending limit for each household. So we really wanted this program to really be built around the household level, because we need to know if we're serving 2 individuals in that household, 4 individuals in that household, or 1. We want that really to be built around that whole family approach. So I find it easier to start here, but you can start either place. It's going to basically take you through the same steps, just in different orders. But let's say we want to go ahead and create a new household here. We can click add a new household. The first thing it's going to say is, hey, can you just double check that a household by that name doesn't exist already, or that a household by that name exists and you've double checked that it's not the same household that you're serving. So it's just going to pause here and be like, hey, can you double check this? You can double check it. You can also search again at this stage. So let's say you forgot to double check. Now you want to look by last name. You can do that here. If that household and client doesn't exist, you can go ahead and say no matches, add a new household or client. Since we came in through the household screen, the first thing it's going to ask us for is a household name. Put some fun examples here. So I think this one, we might start with a house around Star Wars, just because we all know some client names there. We all know some people there. So we're going to go ahead and call this household the Star Wars household.
And Angelica,
Yes.
there is a question in the chat. Would the database of all counties be visible, or will it be just to the specific county we are in? So if you're based in Sarasota, we'll only show that, or will it show everything?
It is going to show all counties, which we're actually really excited about, because it means that if someone is living in, North Sarasota and then they cross over the boundary into Manatee, we'll still be able to see that and track that based off of the agencies they're working with. So it will show all counties. And then as we start to use the new system for that duplication check, about a year into this process, year one's going to be that Excel. Year two, we're going to have more live information in the system to be working with and verifying. You'll still be able to see all counties. So that way we can really track client movement too, and make sure that, if someone's right on that border, we still know that they've been served and it won't be as segmented. All right. So coming in here back to our household creation information tab, we give each household a name. That can be the common last name of the household. It can be the last name of one of the people in this household, whoever you're working with, you'll give the household name. There is an address field. We're going to just go ahead and say that they live at the community foundation with me. And there's an area to select the county that they live in. This is one of those areas we're working with our developer. This list looks strange. Don't worry, by the time we get live, this list will be more streamlined. There won't be a couple of different options here. I see a question about the client moving. I will come back to that after we've created this household. So give me just one moment there. The next thing it's going to ask is this address current for our client? Since we're creating a household and we're getting their address information for the first time, we're going to assume this is a yes. There's not really an option to put in an old address if we're just entering the client into the system.
There is another question in the chat, Angelica.
Yes,
builds off of that.
Yeah, I saw that one. We're going to come to that.
Okay,
we're going to create this household and then I'll show how we'll do that part. So we'll say this is a current address. It's going to ask how long they've been at that address. And then if they've moved recently, the reason for their change. So the reason for an address change within the last couple of years. There's also an option here to say, nope, I've been at my address for over a year. We don't need to worry about a change, but we're curious to know, if people have been evicted, if they've moved very intentionally, if they've just moved to the area. And if there's something interesting or that you think we should highlight in that process, you can also say that there's an other reason, and you can enter notes right here in this note box to tell us why. Then the next thing we do is we add clients to the household. So you can see the way that this was organized. The household information is up here with the household name, the address, this information of how long they've been in the household, and then we get down to the client information. So the first thing we're going to do is add the adult who's sitting in our office with us, or, has just left our office and we've collected their information on paper. The first thing we have to select is, are they an adult or are they a child? This just populates some of the questions below to make sure they're a little bit more applicable to the person that we're entering. And then similarly, there's another level here of, are they over 18 or under 18? These are very similar questions. The only reason that they're set up this way is because they're populating two different areas within this system. So we're pretty sure if we can consolidate it, but right now just go ahead, and if it's an adult, it can be 18 and older. If it's a child, under 18. It's just a stop to make sure that we're answering those things the correct way both times. And then we put their names in here. So let's say we're entering a Star Wars house. We'll call our first person Luke. We put his name in here. You can enter middle name if you have it. We've kept the requirements as minimally as we can based off of what your client is willing to share. So you'll see there's very little that is absolutely required, but we do want to know as much as you can possibly provide in this space. Now, as far as date of birth, you can verify this with a driver's license, with any information that they can give you. When you click on this calendar, you can enter this two ways. I know sometimes these calendar things can be a little bit tricky. You can just type in the birthday right here if you want to, or if you prefer to use a calendar method, just know you don't have to individually click backwards through every month until you hit their birthday. If you want to zoom out very rapidly, you can either touch the month here, or you can touch the year, and it'll take you to a whole bunch of other options for months and years. So just know you don't have to click one by one back through all of the months. Then you enter their contact information. So we'll enter birthday, email, phone number. If you can collect it, race, ethnicity, gender information, highest level of education, marital status, if they're employed or unemployed. If they're employed, it's going to pop up and just ask for where they're employed. Once again, not required, But if you can, it's very helpful, especially for the fiscal agents as they're approving your applications, just to have as much information as they can about the clients. And then the relationship with your agency, since you're creating their profile, it's going to assume you have a relationship with this person. Once again, it's going to populate with the information based off of the login information that you're using. So it will predetermine the agency that you are with. It will pre-assign you as the relationship contact. It'll ask that question of if you're receiving case management or not, and you have a spot to add some notes. So when we're done there, we can go ahead and submit it. And we can see now that we have a household. We have a household, we have people in the household. If we want to add adults or youth, we can go ahead and do that. If we click on, let's say we wanted to add a youth to this household, the first thing that's going to pop up is any unassigned youth. So if anyone has created a client, just solely a client, and they aren't placed in a household yet, those people will pop up here. It makes it a little bit easier to add them to a household. If you start in the clients tab, they'll pop up here. If not, you can go ahead and click add a new youth, and it'll take you through the same basic information. The only thing that really changes is if they're a youth, it will also ask you to select the school that they go to. But otherwise, basically the information is the same. Obviously, if we're saying this person is under 18, let's say they're, a newborn baby, they aren't going to have an email, they aren't going to have a phone number. That's okay. You can leave that blank. As long as we have that for somebody in the household, that's fine. We don't need you to put that there for any youth. You can kind of hop over that and then complete the rest of the questions. Now, I saw we had a couple of questions in the chat about people moving counties and how we would do a new address or how we would track that information. And then also, would they be eligible for a different funding cap because they moved counties? So I'm going to answer that second question first, which would be to say that the goal of Season of Sharing is that each household would have a $2,000 limit per year, whether or not they move counties. They wouldn't be eligible for an additional $2,000 just because they crossed county borders. That being said, if there is a huge extenuating circumstance, like let's say there was, a terrible hurricane and an additional amount of money can help them reestablish secure housing, that's a type of contact where you can reach out to me and I'll work with your agency and our fiscal agencies to make sure that this is the best use of Season of Sharing dollars, that it makes the most sense to use those, that there aren't other resources available, but we can independently approve people to go above that $2,000 limit if needed. So I would say across the board, if they move counties, they're still only eligible for that $2,000. If you have an extenuating circumstance or think that this is a client who would be best served by a higher limit, reach out to me. We'll navigate that together. Then I see if two agencies share a client, both can submit as long as that $2,000 limit is not hit. Yes. So you'll be able to look at funding requests, all funding requests for a household, and we'll be tracking that the same way to make sure that, so for example, here we can pull up when we said view funding request for this client, they are being served by two different agencies. One's the Community Foundation, one is Civicor. And you can see here, the Community Foundation submitted one, it was approved for $1,700, then Civicor submitted another, they were going to hit their limit, so we turned it down. The fiscal agency said, hey, we can't fund this much, we're going to turn it down. But you'll also be able to look here and see what other funding requests a client has. So that got one question, and then let's see. And then if they move from one county to another, can it be in their own record? So yes, let's go look at the Benson household, for example. We can go in and we can edit them. And so we're in this household. We can see right here the lifetime amount that they've received so far and the amount that's been funded in the last year. Keep in mind that this is only information is going to be only current from the time we start using this new system. So I don't want you to rely on this information for that first year that we're migrating over, because that past information isn't going to come over because we can't build the whole household or the whole client profile based off of the information that we have. But come year two, come February 1st of 2024, we will be able to use this amount to actually verify the last 365 days of what's been approved. The other thing that will happen at that point is we're also going to add a column here that will just have that information here as something that you can verify. So it's going to pull the total amount that's been funded in the last 365 days, and you'll be able to see that on the household page. We don't have that right now. And the reason for that is that it's not going to be up to date. That backlog of records is going to be saved over here in the documents section until 1 year of using the system. As far as editing addresses, sorry, I got a little bit distracted. We can click back on this edit button. It'll take us into the household. And then we can click on addresses. And you can see here, we have an address. If we need to change an address, if they move counties or they have a new address, you can just click add a new address. And it'll collect that information for you right here. You save it, and then that'll either move counties or to a new, more updated address for that client. All right. You can edit information if you need to. We would ask that you don't edit an address. If the address is a new address, we'd ask that you add it new rather than, changing the address just so that we can see that that client has moved and where they've moved from. But if you are, for instance, editing an information or putting a new member into a household and you need to edit something, you've made a typo, something's gone wrong, you can edit it. You can always look for this little pencil mark and you can go back in and edit things when you need to. All right. Editing information is the additional $1,500 for rent other than HUD or Section 8. It really depends. In that situation, I would say that often some Section 8 clients will have to take it on a case-by-case basis. If that additional money can make them financially stable, then that's a conversation you can have with me or with the fiscal agency. They're not categorically excluded from it, but I think that would be a conversation that we'd want to dive into that client's independent situation a little bit more to figure out whether or not that additional limit made sense. So happy to have that conversation or set us up with myself and the fiscal agency for your county to talk through it together. As for a domestic violence center, let's talk. Myrna, I'm going to make a note of your comment here, and I would love to reach out to you directly if that's all right, and let's talk through that together. Actually, Kay, would you mind writing that down for me?
Yep, got it.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. And then for case management, when it comes to reapplying for a client or for other funding, will we need to resubmit all docs again for that additional funding? Great question as well. So in this household tab, the other thing that lives here are documents. So documents, as you upload them to a household or when you're getting ready to apply on behalf of your client for dollars, it will save your documents. You'll need to add them all in here and upload them into this document section within a household. So when you come in here, you'll add a new document. If you're using that checklist, it tells you which documents you're going to need. You can go ahead and upload those into the household before you even start your funding request. If you start a funding request and then you say, oh, I need to actually upload the lease, you can save the funding request. You can leave, upload a lease, come back into your funding request. But any documents that you upload here will live within that household. So let's say, there's a lease in place and it's a 1-year lease, but after that it goes month to month. They got rent in January of 2023. They come back in February of 2024. That lease is still valid. If that's the case, you'll have a copy of it here. If not, you'll need to, update or upload a new document, but any old documents that you've uploaded are here and you're able to reuse. Perfect. And I see somebody else who also wants to talk about confidentiality. So I will be more than happy to have that conversation and we'll figure out what we can do there. This is exactly why I wanted to have these conversations, and especially why we're still actively working with the developer so we can figure out what privacies we can put in place.
Yes, and I've noted the 2 people that would want to have that conversation as well.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. Perfect. So I'll recirculate with you guys after this and we'll find a time to have that conversation. All right. So we've gone through how to create a household, how to change addresses, how to edit information. So the next thing that we'll probably want to talk through is how to request money. That's kind of the main goal of this. So we've built the households, we've come to this stage where we're ready to start actually requesting the dollar amount. And so what we can do here is there's a few different places that we can start that process. Right now, I am in a household. I'm in the Benson household. I can click from here and I can go into their funding requests. I can see what that history looks like. I can see things that have been approved, things that have been denied, things that are, pending right now and have already been requested. This is a challenging household to do this with because I was playing with them earlier and we know that they've been rejected from a couple of fundings, but you can start this here. You can start a funding request right here. If I add a funding request, you can also go to your funding request tab at the top. You can add a funding request here and link it up to a household that you're working with. Also on your home screen, there's a button to add a funding request. We tried to put the buttons as many places as we could to make it as easy as possible to get started there. So once your client and your household are in the system, adding a funding request for them should be decently easy. I'm going to just start us from your homepage. Just we'll say that they're already in the system, that you've had that initial meeting, you built the household tab, maybe you've added some documents. What we'll do now is we will go into creating a new funding request. Because we've already entered them into the system, we can search by their household, we could search by an individual person. We'll search by a household here. And you can see once again, here, anybody who has this option for me to create a funding request for, these are the people that I have access to. So these are people who have an existing relationship with my agency. If I see that I want to create a funding request for DD Pickles, I would just go back out. I can either view the members here. Yep, I can view members right here and create a relationship with my agency. And that would then give me the option to create a funding request for them. And we can just go ahead, we'll just use that example household that we were already using, and we can click in and create a funding request. Once again, all of these questions are on that checklist that are saved in the documents folder if it's easier for you to answer them on paper and then put them in afterwards. If not, you can get started right here. Things will automatically kind of populate inside of this system, including the date requested, the referring agency, your name in the situation based off of your login. The status is going to be requested for now. You're working on it, so it hasn't obviously been formally requested yet, but it's something that you're working on. The first thing that we'll need you to do is select the county. So as we talked about, don't mind this test one. This will be gone by the time you get into the system, but you'll have a choice of kind of 5 options here. We work with 4 counties and 2 of them, or 1 of them has 2 fiscal agents. So you have the option of, for Sarasota County, you would choose Glasser-Schoenbaum. For Charlotte County, you would choose obviously United Way. For DeSoto, it's going to be Step Up. If you work in Manatee, we know that people work more closely with either Step Up or Turning Points. That's okay. You can select here. You can choose which agency you would like to send this request to. So that's where you're going to be selecting the county every time. If it is one county, if it's Sarasota, Charlotte, or DeSoto, that answer is very clear. If it's Manatee, you have a choice. And if you're me and you're testing the system, you'll have a test county as well, but that will not show up for you. After you've selected a county, we're just going to go ahead and say that we're living in Sarasota currently. The next thing that we're going to have is a cause of the crisis. There's options here to select, certain kind of common causes of crisis. And there's also the option to say that there's another unexpected expense or something else that you'd like to detail. If you want to do that, there are areas to add notes too, but we just kind of want to collect a basic baseline of information about what has caused them to be in this situation. Then we're asking for the dollar amount of their request. So you'll enter whatever amount that they're requesting. So if that's an electric bill and it's $269, you would put that here. And then you select a requesting client. So this is tied to the household. So you can come in here and you'll select who the main person on this request is. Once again, the request will save with the household, so it will link to each person's profile if needed, but you just choose one person to kind of get it started. So if the person who's sitting in your office, we want to know who that person is. And then we get to the use of funds area. Oh, I see that we are requesting a 10-minute break. Let me get through this. This won't be that much longer, and then we'll take a quick break. Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. Use of funds section here. So you'll select the requesting client, and then the next thing is to tell us where that funding should be going. So let's say here that we're requesting funds for a utility payment. Some of this text will be gone by the time that you guys get into the system. So this text is going to disappear. So just right after utility use of funds, there'll be a drop down for selecting which utility type it is. We're going to add gas to this too. But let's say we're looking at an electric bill and we're looking at one that has been disconnected. We're able to select those different things from these drop-down menus. As you work with this system, if you notice that something is missing from these drop-down menus that would be really helpful to you, please send that to me and please let us know, because I know only as much as I know from my end here at the foundation, but I know you all know a lot more being on the front lines, working with these clients directly. If you see options that are very much so missing from this, please reach out, please let us know. We can add options whenever and add different categories. So if there's a major category that's missing, reach out, let us know, happy to make those edits. The next thing that you'll do is you'll come down here to the requirements section. Now this is going to also look just a tiny bit different when you get into it. And that will be that there'll be a verification area and then a documents area. We really want to emphasize the documents that you need to upload. So that will be shown here just a little bit different. Well, there'll be something that says, did you verify that they've hit their limit? And then a list of the documents that you need to add. What our goal is that you'll be going through and checking these things off as you go. So you can say, yes, I did verify that they haven't hit their limit. I looked at that spreadsheet. I've looked in the system. It looks like they haven't reached their limit within the last 365 days. And then what we'll also need is a copy of the most recent bill for old accounts, or for new accounts, we need documentation that shows a new account number and a home address for a client. So what you're going to do is you're going to say, okay, I need this document. If you've already added it into the household, great. What you'll come down here and do is you'll say add document, and then you can select it from any documents that were inside that household. In this situation, I hadn't uploaded it yet. That's okay too. You can say, oh, you know what? I didn't upload that document yet. I'm going to go ahead and save my progress here. Yep, I already added the document field. We've hit one of my glitches. That's okay. Essentially, you would save it, and then you would go add the document into the household tab, and then you would come back and reattach it to this funding request. In this case, because I've already said I'm adding a document, it's mad at me. We're working with our developer on this. It will not be an issue by the time you get into the system, but we're just going to select one to place here in the meantime. And if I had that correct document uploaded, I would then check this box, and it would tell me, okay, it's going to double check here that I checked my boxes, and also that I've put a document here, the right number of documents for this request. So if I needed 3 documents, we're going to be asking that you upload 3 documents here. And then we'll be able to save it. If we were ready to submit it, we could also submit it. Cool part about our system is that as soon as I clicked save, it is now on my list of the funding requests that I have. I can either edit it, or I can go in and I can submit it to a fiscal agency. With that, I think somebody who had the idea of a 10-minute break had a great idea. Let's take a pause for 5-10 minutes. We'll group back here at 4:20. We'll go through the rest of kind of Q&As, stew on some questions. Feel free to put them in the chat. I'll provide some answers. And at 4:20, we'll come back and we'll finish out our training for today. I don't think it'll last till 5. We've made it pretty far so far, but we just have a couple more steps to go through. So let's put a pause on, and I'll see you all at 4:20. All right, it is 4:20. I think that people are starting to come back. For those of you who are back, we had some questions in the chat during the break that I'm going to just try to address really quickly before we hop back over to the platform again. So the first question was, can season of sharing help with lot rent? So if you have a mobile home on a lot or an RV on a lot, can season of sharing be used to supplement that lot rent? Absolutely. That is something that we do, and it is something that can be eligible. So yes, absolutely. You would include that as a rent, and you can clarify in a text box there that it would be a lot rent. And you would need the backup information too for how much that, where it's located, how much is owed. So kind of whatever the equivalent of a lease, if it is a lease that's attached to it, we would need that documentation. Another question that I had was, what do we do if we have somebody who is, let's say, in between households? So an adult child who's moved in with their parents was an example that we saw in the chat. Do they get their own separate household? Do they move? Do we add them to the parents' household? How does that work? There's some flexibility in the new system there. And I'm going to go ahead and share screen just so that you can see what I'm looking at here while we have this conversation. So when we're in the household tab in the new system, we can look at a household and we can see, children that are in that household and adults that are in that household. You can also see there's this option here that says, is this their primary household? There's an option to edit that and make this not their primary household, and also to disconnect an adult from a household. So if this Olivia Benson was moving out and we wanted to put her somewhere else, we could remove her from the household right here. And we can also tell her this, that she could stay a part of this household, but it wouldn't be her primary household. So we can do all of that in the system. What's going to happen from here is that she's going to pop up in that piece here where we can see here, there's somebody who's in the household. This is a little bit strange. I haven't gotten to this screen before, but this is exciting and the type of things that we can navigate together. It's asking us to select a head of a household. We can do that. But we just removed an adult from the household. So there were 2 Olivia Bensons. Now there's only 1. And one of those Olivia Bensons is now a free agent who is not attached to a household. So if she was moving out, we could create an independent household for her and then assign her back to it. And the way we would do that was kind of what we saw before. We would come, we would add a new household. As we add that household, we can look for clients who might be a part of that household. And add them here. We can either add a client here or we can select them from a list of our clients. We'll navigate that and I will get you a more concrete training document there. I think that's going to be something that we'll want kind of step-by-step instructions for moving adults between households. So I'll work on that too. But know that it is an option. It's not something I'm super familiar with, as I haven't had to do it much as I've just been testing the system, but I'll create a training document on how to do that. And then finally, I had a question from somebody on an iPad asking about budget sheets. That's something I would love to revisit with our advisory council and then get back to you on. If you typed that question about budget sheets into the chat, can you add your contact information into the chat and I'll get back with you directly? That would be really helpful for me. All right. So then those were the only questions I had. Does anybody else have another question while we're here, while we're on the question section that I can answer right now, or else we'll hop back into kind of going through this process together? All right. So where we left off is we had a funding request that we were getting ready to submit to a fiscal agent. So here we had gotten our documents ready. We had our household set up. We have our client information in here. We've entered the documents that we needed. We've checked that we did verify that they hadn't reached their limit. We checked that we have a copy of their bill here. We uploaded a bill here. There is an area if you want to add additional agency information. So let's say St. Vincent de Paul is meeting half of their electric bill. You can add that information here. Or whatever information is applicable to kind of this request. If you click here, you can add information about it with a note section about what's being covered or not covered. So if we were ready to go ahead and submit that, we can just press the submit button at this stage. And then you'll see it's moved from my list of saved requests into my list of funding requests. So things that are active, they've gone to a fiscal agent at this point. Now, when it hits our fiscal agents, I'm going to show you just very briefly here. We're not diving into like the whole approval process, but I will show you just a couple of things that happen when a fiscal agent looks through your request. So I'm just logging in under my fiscal agent profile now so that I can approve this request as we work through it together. Don't mind that my computer is tired. It is 4:25 and I think my computer has had a long Tuesday. So as far as a fiscal agent profile, what they'll see is something kind of similar. They can also see funding requests for their county that are waiting for approval. So we just submitted this one from Olivia Benson. We'll go ahead and just take a look at that one together. What we're going to see here is several different things. We're going to see basic information about my client, contact information, their address, whether or not they're inactive, household information. Household information is helpful. You can see the total number of individuals, adults versus children. The fiscal agent will also be able to see these numbers of the lifetime amount funded and the amount funded within the last year. Keep in mind, this is only as current as the information that is going into the system. So that spreadsheet will still be a super valuable tool for now. As the information gets entered into the system, this will become more and more accurate over the next year. Current household address, we can see the people in the household. And then we get into the funding request itself. They'll be able to kind of see that who's requesting it, what it caused it, getting into all the details that we just filled out. They'll be able to see that you have verified all of these things. They'll be able to see the documents that you've added. Now, as per any tech system, what we can do is build, requirements. We want to know that you've checked the boxes. We want to know that you've uploaded the right amount of documents. I can't promise that you're going to upload the right documents. So there might be a time where a fiscal agent might need to come to you and you might have said, I uploaded an electric bill and you didn't. Maybe it was something different. Maybe it didn't have all the information you need. That part is still going to be a back and forth as needed between you and the fiscal agency who's looking at your application. So they'll look at all of these documents. They'll probably double check that that client, hasn't hit their limit this year. So they'll be double checking all of that information. After they're done doing their check, making sure the right documents are here, all the backup that they need is here, they can either approve the request or deny the request. If they approve the request, what's going to happen is some options for them to edit in here. They'll be assigning a grant number to this. This is kind of internal for fiscal agents. It's just tracking how many dollars they have on hand to grant out. Very simple. But they also have an area down here where they'll be entering information that you can see. So they'll be verifying what type of vendor they're paying, whether it's a mortgage provider or a landlord. They'll be entering in the actual payee information here so they can enter it in. Cool part for fiscal agents. These are all going to be payees that pop up here. So if we're paying FPL 500 times, they'll just be able to select FPL. They don't have to enter it every single time. Not really applicable for most of you on this call, but something that's interesting to see. And they'll also be entering here the date that they approved this application. So you can see when it's approved. There will be another field added here by the time we go live in the system that says date the check will be printed. So if they approve it and you need to know for your client when that check's going in the mail, you can go back in and you can see the fields that they've entered here to verify that they approved it on this date. A check will be printed on this date, and this is the amount that they're printing the check for. And this is the vendor that that check is going to. So you'll be able to see all of that once they do an approval. Now, if in turn, we're going to deny this request, let's say this was actually a mortgage statement and what I needed here was an electric bill, they can also say deny request. When that happens, same thing, they're going through kind of the whole funding request. It opens up a new fiscal agent section here at the bottom. And instead of being date approved, it's going to be the date that it was denied. The reason for the denial, don't mind that the 50 states are options on here right now. They will be gone by the time we move into the new system, but they can tell you it was incomplete. They can say that they verified that the client is exceeding their regular limit, and they can write you notes here. So they can say, in place of an electric bill, you uploaded a lease, and that's not what I need to approve this. And then they go ahead and submit that. I'm going to go ahead and put some notes in here, like need electric bill. And I'm going to say that this was an incomplete application. And then I'm going to submit it. Now that's going to move, as far as I'm concerned, as the fiscal agent, it moves back to you. I no longer need to do anything with it. It's back in your court as a case manager. So we're going to get out of my fiscal agent profile. Job is just to show you the information that you'll have access to as part of that approval process. We're going to come back into where I am a case manager. And here, so there, once again, we know there are a couple glitches in the system that we're fine tuning. Right now, one of those things is that when we look at our funding requests, we'll be able to see ones that are saved, ones that are in process, ones that have been approved, and ones that have been denied. Right now, denials aren't showing up. That's a glitch. We're working on it. It will be in place by the time we go live. But normally you'd be able to see that right here. So we would be able to see that, we just denied a funding request for the Benson household. If, for any reason you want to dive into it in more detail and you don't see it there, you can come back to this household. You can click view funding requests, and we can see right here that this request was denied. If I want more details as to why, I can also click in here. I can scroll down. And you can see right here, the fiscal agent has now, this information is visible to me. When was it denied? Why was it denied? And here's some notes from the fiscal agent as to why they denied it. At this stage, one thing, and this is something we'll clarify a lot over those weekly calls after this training, and once we go live, we would ask that if you have a denied request, instead of editing it in the request itself, so instead of going in, removing the mortgage and resubmitting it, we put this big copy request button here, and we would prefer that you copy a request and submit a new request rather than editing a denied request. The reason for that is so that we can track when things are getting denied and why. If we know that we aren't getting the right documentation, we can run more trainings on what the correct documentation is or how to upload it or what's going on there. If you're just editing a request that has been in existence, we can't see that denial anymore. And so we're trying wherever possible to ask you to please copy the request rather than editing the existing request. When you do that, you'll copy the request. It'll repopulate with everything that you've already submitted. You really don't have to do much more. The only thing you'll have to do is reattach the documents. So you can do that. You can save it as a work in progress. You can come back to it, but just know we'd ask that you copy the request instead. I'm going to take a minute to look at the questions. How many days does it typically take for an approval or denial once the full application is submitted? How long should we wait to review? Generally, it's pretty fast. I mean, I think fiscal agents, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of them are approved within 24 to 48 hours. It's a pretty fast turnaround of just the approval or denial process. So I think you can keep an eye on it. It's not a very slow process. And some people are receiving a full approval list on Fridays. It will be available live as they're approving or denying. You'll be able to see that live now. If that is something that you or agency would particularly like to, get one list one time a week, we can talk about that. One of the really cool parts about this system is that we have live access to every field at all times. So if you wanted us to run a report once a week and pop it on your home screen, that's something we can do too. So if you want to have that conversation, reach out to me and we'll set up a time to have it. And just a repeat question of, can two separate agencies apply for funding as long as that household doesn't hit their annual limit? Yes. So if a school, if somebody is approaching through a school social worker and they got an electric bill covered, and then they're also working with a different agency who's covering their lease, that's fine as long as they aren't hitting above that $2,000 limit. And is there a signature required for this application? Yes, there will be. So that's one thing we're working with the developers. We need to add a couple fields at the very bottom of the funding, actually of the client entry, that says, first off, we want the client to acknowledge that this information is being saved in a confidential database. And we want them to we want you to check that you've confirmed that with your client. And then we're also adding the fields for whether or not they'd be willing to tell their story to the Herald Tribune. You'll notice that that is very predominantly missing right now. It's not intentional. It will be edited by the time we go live. Lourdes, I'm going to add your questions. We've had a few other questions about domestic assault victims and kind of how we can keep their privacy inside of this system. If it's all right with you, I'm going to add you to my list to have that conversation with, and I'll get in touch with you probably tomorrow to set up a time to have that conversation. And can case managers edit the case information, or can fiscal agents edit information inside of the application? So let's say you submit an application to a fiscal agent, you say it's for $269. They look at it, it's actually for $250 and they need to change that. They have both the power to edit it and the power to approve a different amount. So you can see that too, and they can put that in their notes to you that say, hey, we weren't going to cover the late fee here, so here's the amount that we've approved. Okay, let's see. Is there a way for case managers to request in the system to pick up a check once it's approved? That's a great question. Let me visit that with our advisory council and I'll get back to you on it about picking up checks versus having them mailed. And we can see what we can build in and put in place for that. And then will we need to have the client sign a blank piece of paper and attach it? That's what we're going to do with the checkbox instead. So we'll probably have a quoted statement that we'd like for you to read to your client that says, I am acknowledging that this information is going to be stored, but rather than needing for them to sign a paper and then have you put that in the system, we're going to take that you have had that conversation with your client as their approval. All right. Well, this is perfect. So we're reaching the conclusion of kind of what I've prepared for today. As we mentioned, this is going to be a process. I know that this is new. This is a new system. We're finding things that, aren't working perfectly, but we're willing to work through it. We have a developer working alongside us. It's something that I think we can and will get through. And so I just, first off, thank you for being on this call this whole time. Steps from here moving forward. As I mentioned, I am hand creating everybody's logins. So next week, you can expect an email from me to everybody at your agency who has been registered that gives you the email that where they're registered in, the agency they're assigned to, their passwords, and like also instructions for changing your password. It doesn't have to stay what I made it. Please feel free to change it. We'll include those next week too. I'll also include the agency information that I've built around your agency. If that doesn't look right or doesn't look like the way you'd like your agency to be classified, you'll let me know that too. So let's say I have 6 or 7 St. Vincent de Paul's built into the system. If I have the wrong address, if I have the wrong conference name, like that's your moment next week to let me know and I can make all of those changes. Our plan is to move forward with starting to use this system on February 1st. So that's a pretty quick turnaround. We have 2 weeks here. We're going to have those conversations. Our goal would be to move into the system February 1st. Also expect probably email communications from me on January 30th, probably also January 31st, just saying, hey, get ready, we're going. If you have questions, if you have issues, let us know. Our plan is to start February 1st. But that said, we know it's a brand new system. We know that there can be glitches. We know that things are going on. That's okay. I'm going to go ahead and just stop sharing so you guys can all see my face instead of my screen. And please just know that we're working on it. We have a developer in hand. As those things come up, let me know about them and I'm happy to bring them to our developer. We will correct those issues as we go, but there will be things that surprise us too. It's a brand new system. We'll work through it together. Please just keep me in the loop if you're seeing anything so that I can keep our developer in the loop and we can work through it. Also expect that things will change. Questions will be added. Drop-down menu options might change. I'm going to do my best to either make those so small that they're not super noticeable or so big that I'm going to put a big announcement on your home screen that tells you what that change has been and how to look out for it. If it's something as small as a drop-down menu option, I might not mention it, but if we need to, we need to. But just be aware as we work through this, things will change a little bit here and there and just expect that, roll with that to the best of your abilities. But if not, reach out to me and I'm happy to either set up that time one-on-one or have those conversations with you and your team. I'll send out dates for the weekly Q&A sessions. And finally, if you are having a terrible time, if you have the black thumb of technology, please know our fiscal agents are still here to help. I am still here to help. If your internet goes out for your entire agency and you need to submit something in the old process, we are here to help you do that and work through this process with you. It's one of the reasons we're going to have weekly calls for the first 6 to 8 weeks. We are willing to walk through this with you, meet with you, train your staff as much as we can. We're here to help. There's always a backup in place should something go terribly wrong. But just know, we're here. We have those backups in place. Your fiscal agents are a great place to get started and kind of walk through any troubleshooting that you're having. Tech issues, bring them to me, and we'll work through them all together. But thank you so much for being here.